586 BCE, Jerusalem fell. The armies of Babylon broke through its defenses, burned the temple, and carried its treasures into exile. Ancient texts describe bronze objects, gold vessels, silver vessels, bowls, and sacred furnishings being taken away. But one object is never clearly identified among the captured treasures: the Ark of the Covenant. For centuries, it had stood at the center of Israel's sacred story. And then, it disappeared. Was it destroyed, hidden beneath Jerusalem, carried across the desert, or taken somewhere much farther away? More than 2,500 years later, no discovery has conclusively answered that question. But to understand where the Ark may have gone, we first have to understand how it came to Jerusalem. And that story leads us to King David. A king emerges from stone. For generations, historians debated how much could be known about David outside the biblical texts. Then, in 1993, archaeologists excavating at Tel Dan in northern Israel uncovered fragments of a broken basalt monument. It had been erected by an enemy of ancient Israel. Carved into its surface was an Aramaic inscription. Among the damaged lines appeared a phrase most scholars interpret as House of David. Those few words changed the discussion. The inscription did not prove every biblical story about David. It did not tell us exactly how large his kingdom was, or settle every archaeological debate surrounding his reign. But it provided important evidence that an ancient royal dynasty associated with David was known outside the biblical text. David was no longer a name preserved only in Scripture. His dynasty appeared in an inscription produced by one of Israel's ancient enemies. And according to the biblical story, the city that would define David's reign was Jerusalem. From fugitive to king. The biblical David does not begin as a powerful monarch. He begins as a shepherd. Later, he enters the world of King Saul. But as David's reputation grows, Saul comes to see him as a treat. David becomes a fugitive. He moves through the rugged wilderness of Judah, hiding among caves and strongholds. Around him gathers an unlikely following: warriors, fugitives, debtors, and men living on the margins. David survives. Then Saul dies in battle. David first establishes himself as king in Hebron. Eventually, according to the biblical account, he becomes king over all Israel. But his kingdom still lacks a political center capable of connecting north and south. Between them stood an ancient fortified settlement, Jerusalem. The city of David, Jerusalem, was strategically positioned along a narrow ridge surrounded by steep valleys. According to the biblical narrative, the city was controlled by the Jebusites. David captured the stronghold and made it his capital. Exactly how his forces entered remains uncertain. For years, some proposed that David's soldiers penetrated Jerusalem through part of its ancient water system, including the feature now called Warren's Shaft. But archaeology has complicated that interpretation, so we should not treat that route as established fact. What matters is what happened next. Jerusalem became permanently associated with David's dynasty. The political center of his kingdom had been established. Now David would transform Jerusalem into something more, a sacred center. And to do that, he brought one extraordinary object into the city, the Ark of the Covenant. The Ark comes to Jerusalem. The Ark was unlike anything else associated with ancient Israelite worship. The book of Exodus describes a chest made from acacia wood and covered with gold. Above it stood 2 golden cherubim. The Ark was associated with the covenant between God and Israel, and with the stone tablets given to Moses. Within the biblical narrative, It became a powerful symbol of God's presence among his people. David determined to bring it to Jerusalem, but the first journey ended suddenly. The ark was being transported when the oxen stumbled. A man named Uzzah reached out and took hold of it. According to the biblical account, he was struck down. The procession stopped. David was afraid. For 3 months, the ark remained at the house of Obed-Edom. Then David attempted the journey again. This time, sacrifices accompanied the procession. Trumpets sounded, people shouted, and David danced as the ark entered Jerusalem. The king had brought Israel's most sacred object into his new capital. But David would not build the temple that would become its permanent home. That task would fall to his son, Solomon and the Holy of Holies. According to the biblical account, Solomon constructed a permanent sanctuary in Jerusalem. At its deepest point was the Holy of Holies, the most sacred chamber of the temple. The ark was brought inside. 1 Kings describes the ark there, with the 2 stone tablets associated with the covenant. Then something remarkable happens. The ark gradually disappears from the biblical narrative. Years become decades. Decades become centuries. Kings come and go. Empires rise around Judah. And eventually, a new power turns its attention toward Jerusalem, Babylon. 586 BCE, Jerusalem burns. In the early 6th century BCE, Judah stood in the shadow of the Neo-Babylonian Empire. Rebellion brought devastating consequences. Jerusalem was besieged. In 586 BCE, Babylonian forces destroyed the city and burned the temple. The biblical accounts describe sacred objects being removed: bronze, silver, gold, vessels, and temple furnishings. But the ark is not clearly named among them. There is no surviving statement telling us the Babylonians took the ark. Nor do we have archaeological evidence showing exactly what happened to it. By the Second Temple period, the ark was no longer part of the sanctuary in the way earlier tradition describes. Somewhere in this violent transition, its trail disappears. And that silence has produced theories for more than 2,000 years. Theory 1. Hidden beneath Jerusalem. The first possibility keeps the ark exactly where its story last places it: Jerusalem. Could someone have hidden it before Babylon entered the city? Later, Jewish traditions developed accounts in which sacred objects were concealed before the temple's destruction. One tradition associates King Josiah with hiding the ark. Jerusalem itself contains an extraordinary underground landscape of ancient chambers, cisterns, passages, and foundations. That reality has helped fuel centuries of speculation. Could an undiscovered chamber still contain something? Possibly. But possibility is not evidence. The Temple Mount is also among the most sensitive religious and archaeological locations anywhere in the world. Modern archaeology cannot simply excavate beneath its sacred structures looking for the ark. So, the theory survives. Hidden beneath stone. Impossible to confirm with the evidence currently available, and impossible at present to completely dismiss. But Jerusalem is not the only location connected to the mystery. Theory 2. Jeremiah and Mount Nebo. Another ancient tradition takes us east, across the Jordan, to Mount Nebo. The second book of Maccabees preserves a tradition involving the prophet Jeremiah. According to the story, Jeremiah took the ark, the tent, and the altar of incense and traveled to the mountain associated with Moses. There, he found a cave. The sacred objects were placed inside, and the entrance was sealed. When some who followed attempted to mark the route, the location could no longer be found. Jeremiah declared that the place would remain unknown until God gathered his people again. It is one of the ancient traditions attempting to explain the ark's disappearance. But no archaeological discovery at Mount Nebo has verified that the ark is hidden there. The cave remains part of the tradition. Its location remains unknown, and the mystery moves farther south to Ethiopia. Theory 3. The Ethiopian tradition. For centuries, Ethiopia has preserved one of the world's most famous traditions concerning the ark. The medieval Ethiopian work known as the Kebra Nagast tells a remarkable story connecting King Solomon, the Queen of Sheba, and a son named Menelik. According to this tradition, the ark eventually left Jerusalem and came to Ethiopia. And in the ancient city of Aksum, that tradition remains alive. The Church of Our Lady Mary of Zion is associated with the claim that a sacred object identified as the ark is preserved there. Tradition holds that its guardian dedicates his life to watching over it. The object is not available for independent archaeological examination. That creates an extraordinary situation. For Ethiopian Orthodox believers, the tradition carries profound sacred significance. But archaeology works differently. Without independent examination, dating, and documentation, historians cannot establish that the object associated with Aksum is the biblical ark. So Ethiopia gives us something remarkable. Not archaeological confirmation, but a living religious tradition that continues into the present. Could the ark really have traveled from Jerusalem to Ethiopia? There is currently no conclusive archaeological evidence demonstrating that journey. But the tradition ensures that Aksum remains inseparable from the modern mystery of the lost ark. And there is another possibility, one that requires no secret tunnel, no hidden cave, and no journey across continents. Theory 4. Was it destroyed? The ark may simply have been lost or destroyed. Jerusalem's destruction was catastrophic. Buildings burned, sacred spaces were looted, precious metals could be removed, melted down, and reused. If the ark fell into enemy hands and was dismantled, its identity could have disappeared forever. But once again, we encounter the same problem. There is no surviving evidence proving that happened. No confirmed fragments, no inscription describing its destruction, no archaeological discovery settling the question. The least mysterious explanation is still only a possibility. What does the evidence actually say? So what can we actually say? Hidden in Jerusalem? Possible, but unverified. Mount Nebo? An ancient literary tradition without archaeological confirmation. Ethiopia? A profound living religious tradition, but the claimed object has not been independently authenticated as the biblical ark. Destroyed during Jerusalem's fall? Entirely possible, but also unproven. After more than 2,500 years, every road ends at the same place. A missing object, an incomplete historical record, and no universally accepted archaeological answer. But perhaps that is precisely why the ark continues to fascinate us. Because unlike a mystery that has been solved, this one is still open. From King David to the lost ark. And so the story brings us back to where our journey began. David, a king whose dynasty appears to be referenced on an ancient stone discovered at Tel Dan, a ruler remembered in the biblical narrative as the man who made Jerusalem his capital, and the king who brought the ark into that city with music, sacrifice, and celebration. David could never have known what would happen centuries later. Solomon's temple would rise, Jerusalem would fall, Babylon would burn the sanctuary, and the sacred chest David carried into his capital would become one of history's greatest mysteries. Perhaps it remains hidden beneath ancient stone. Perhaps it traveled farther than anyone imagined. Perhaps it disappeared in the destruction of Jerusalem. We simply don't know. And until physical evidence changes that, the Ark remains suspended between archaeology, ancient literature, religious tradition, and mystery. Somewhere, there may still be an answer. Or perhaps the answer disappeared more than 2,500 years ago. But the search continues, and so will we. This is Terra Testament, where archaeology meets scripture and the mysteries of the ancient world come back to life. Subscribe and join us for the next journey.